Greetings and welcome to Sports101, the sports show that discusses sport beyond the X's and O's. We expand our conversation to include the history, past, in the making, as well as cultural events that look at sport from a people, places, and again, a cultural perspective. I'm your host, Jamar Harp. Be sure to follow me at Coach_Harp412 on Twitter and Jamar Harp on Facebook. Please make sure you get social with SportsZone Chicago, as well as Sports101 and the litany of other shows. You can follow us on Twitter at SportsZone CHI, Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Remember, SportsZone Chicago is a sports talk app. You can watch and listen to my show as well as the many others. Keep up with breaking sports news. If you miss something, don't worry about it. You can search us on YouTube, search SportsZone Chicago. But more importantly, we want everyone to download the SportsZone Chicago app. The SportsZone Chicago app can be found in the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. This week, we'll be covering Breaking the Glass Ceiling, the African American Sports and Entertainment Group. If you look at our title picture right here, the African American Sports and Entertainment Group is a Black-owned group out of the Oakland, California area. And their main goal is to, number one, buy the Oakland Coliseum and the surrounding areas. That's the baseball and football field, as well as the basketball arena, and own an NFL team. Their second objective is to have a Black Wall Street around that area where most people were gentrified. They're trying to have everything Black-owned and bring business to the community. So if we get into our discussion, again, a glass ceiling is a metaphor and is commonly used to represent an invisible barrier that prevents a given demographic from rising beyond a certain level in a hierarchy or political or cultural system. This holds true in particular where African-American ownership in the NFL and all major sports in this country. It's not uncommon for NFL players to refer to the NFL owners as members of a rich white boys club. And I'll kind of explain that as this goes on. At this point in 2021, there's not a single NFL team that's owned by a person of African descent. There's only two people of color that own NFL teams. Those are Kim Pegula. She's a woman of South Korean descent who co-owns the Buffalo Bills. And here's a picture of Miss Pegula right here. You see Kim Pegula on the sideline. Next is Shad Rafiq Khan, more commonly known as Shad Khan. He's a Pakistani-born American who is the majority owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And here's a picture of Mr. Khan right here. When we look at all three major sports in the United States, that's the NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball, there's only one principal owner who's Black, and obviously that's Michael Jordan, who owns a majority stake in the Charlotte basketball franchise. In 2018, the owner of the Carolina Panthers said he'd be putting the team up for sale, and it was an opportunity to increase the diversity of NFL's ownership group. So there was a lot of speculation about who would get this. Sean Combs, most people know him as P. Diddy, he tweeted interest in his purchase in this franchise, and he fit all the criteria. He was a single person. They allow only single ownership. The Green Bay Packers are ushered in under the old rules, so they're allowed to keep the town owning the team, but everybody else has to follow the new rules where you have single ownership. So Combs' estimated net worth by Forbes magazine is $820 million, and he wanted to become the first principal Black owner in the NFL. He was backed by Mr. Kraft of the New England Patriots, who stated Combs was a good businessman and said he respected the mogul. With all this, remember to keep the bid silent because the owners vote on who want to bring into the club, hence the term that we discussed earlier. So the team was ultimately sold to hedge fund billionaire David Tepper, who was obviously white. Now, we do have celebrities in ownership: Will Smith, Kevin Hart, Derek Jeter, Grant Hill, Magic Johnson. They're all partial owners of the teams And most often they're used as marketing arms where they own a small percentage and they could come do player relations, be an ambassador. These are some of the terms that they use for these individuals. And again, they're all people of color, but they don't have a majority ownership stake. Being a partial owner may have helped Tepper's bid, according to Dr. Richard Lapchek. And remember, Dr. Lapchek is the founder of the Diversity of Ethics in Sport at the University of Central Florida. He also conducts the test in regards to the NFL's minority hiring practices. So the NFL is very familiar with Dr. Lapchek. And again, his institute tracks racial and gender diversity in all sports. And Lapchek was quoted as saying, who owners invite into their fraternity, and it's overwhelmingly a fraternity, is self-selective. Again, remember I stated that the owners vote on membership. Lapchek also stated that while rules exist to ensure diverse candidates are considered for team positions, the league and commissioners can't force the owners to accept or even consider people of color when teams are put up for sale. So basically, it's up to the owners who to decide is going to be the new owner. The lack of diversity amongst ownership, management, and coaching becomes even more stark when you consider the makeup of the NFL. According to the Institute's latest reports on the NBA, nearly 85% of the players were people of color or African descent. And in the NFL, almost 80% of the league was of African descent. Lapchek also noted that players have become more vocal and activist-minded in today's age, which he said can be very invaluable. Mr. Lapchek stated that players can use their positions as leverage to advocate for more diversity on all levels of a team. Now, when we speak of being outspoken, the main celebrity that we have to speak of in sports is LeBron James. He's got a lot of criticism for speaking out, and I would like to show a video of him right now and kind of see where all this is coming from.
We do move on now to the harsh words for the NFL coming from one of the biggest names in sports. LeBron James taking direct aim on some NFL team owners, saying they have what he calls a slave mentality. Here's ABC's Adrian Banker.
The biggest name in sports, LeBron James, off court and uncensored, blasting owners of another league, the NFL.
I mean, in the NFL, they got a bunch of old white men owning teams, and they got that slave mentality, and it's like, this is my team. You do what I tell y'all to do, or we get rid of y'all.
James' scathing comments aimed at the response to a player's right to protest, fueled by former quarterback Colin Kaepernick taking a knee in 2016. Critics claim Kaepernick has been frozen out of the league ever since. It's the same reason some celebrities are turning down invites to perform in the upcoming Super Bowl halftime show. The NFL has yet to officially confirm who will appear. The band Maroon 5 has been rumored to headline. James has been one of the most vocal of any player in any sport, criticizing the president.
The number one job in America, the point of person, is someone who doesn't understand the people and really don't give a about the people.
Which prompted an on-air war with commentator Laura Ingraham.
Or as someone once said, shut up and dribble.
We will definitely not shut up and dribble.
On his HBO show, James says he'll continue to express himself.
I'm very educated about what I believe in, and I'm not doing it in a violent way. I'm not knocking on your door saying, listen, if I'm kneeling today, and if you don't kneel with me, I'm knocking you the out. But you know, people go crazy when when things are done outside the box.
And James says the NBA is more tolerant of players' expressions, whether or not Commissioner Adam Silver agrees with their stance. So far, neither the NBA or the NFL have responded, Tom.
All right, Adrian, thank you.
Now, Maya, again, I want to just point out some quick facts from this video. Obviously, number one, he talked about the difference in the NBA and NFL mindset, where in the NBA, players are allowed to be vocal for social change. If you look at the pictures of the Miami Heat, when they wore their hoodies and in reference to Trayvon Martin, all the signage on their shirts, in regards to all the social movements that are happening in this country. If you look at the WNBA and collegiate women's basketball, who have been the most outspoken, and kudos to our women for doing that. They have the freedom to do that. But again, when we look at the NFL, even though LeBron James was told to shut up and dribble, as he stated in the video, NFL players won't even get that opportunity. Again, he referenced Kaepernick's situation with owners just by kneeling, and what some other things that were left from the video, where you can look at the Jerry Jones situation, and where he blatantly told, if you kneel, you can't be a part of the Dallas Cowboys, which reiterates LeBron James' comments and sentiment towards the NFL. Also, another way you can look at their mindset is the NFL Combine. Everyone knows about the, getting naked and getting prodded and getting your butt and thighs measured, but oftentimes people forget about the questioning in these one-on-one interviews, and oftentimes the questions have nothing to do with football. When Dez Bryant was getting drafted, everyone, and this was leaked out, oftentimes the questions aren't leaked out, but the team actually asked, did his mom ever smoke crack? So again, asking people these questions that are above, 18 years old and essentially young men is basically showing your disdain or the hierarchy that you're trying to establish, where I can ask you this crazy stuff, but the reason you're letting me is because I'm allowing you to make this money by, running this ball or tackling people. So that's just something to think about. Again, these attitudes don't apply to the owners. If you look at Jim Irsay of the Indianapolis Colts, when he got caught in a situation that every player would have been dismissed from the team, drunk driving, cocaine, a whole lot of other things. He can't go to the games for, 6 games, but he still owns the team. So that goes to show you that this fraternity, like Dr. Lapchick said, take care of each other. Now, before we get to the African-American Sports Entertainment Group, I want to talk to you about Mr. Rami Loud and the Memphis Kings. This was the first attempt of Black ownership. And here's in United States. Here's a picture of Mr. Rami Loud right here. Mr. Loud played tight end at UCLA from 1953 to 1955. He was a member of the 1953 UCLA Bruins team that lost in the Rose Bowl, and he was also a member of the 1954 team that were declared national champions. Upon matriculation from UCLA, he was drafted by the San Francisco 49ers in the 26th round, the 304th overall pick of the 1956 NFL draft, but instead he chose to play with the Canadian Football League and the British Columbia Lions. At this time, people of color were chosen to do that for different reasons, style of play and money. Remember, in Canadian football, and particularly the AFL, was a more passing game, where the NFL was more down, kick out, old school, running, either isolation or gap scheme. He was cut by the Chicago Bears in 1959, and he joined the AFL as a member of the LA Chargers. He played for the Chargers for 1 year, was released, and then he signed with the Boston Patriots. In 1964, he transitioned into coaching and he was a defensive assistant for the Patriots, the Sweepers of the Atlantic Football Coast League for 2 seasons. And then the Patriots brought him back to be a linebackers coach, and he was the first African-American coach in the history of the AFL. So he's honored for that achievement. Again, the AFL was known for its passing game and signed more players of African descent, and particularly from historically Black colleges and universities. If you remember the Super Bowl when the Jets beat the Green Bay Packers, Green Bay was in tight formations and running the ball, where the Jets were more open and they resembled a modern day offense, back then. So that goes to show you how the spread offense, kind of took the NFL by storm and is what we consider, commonplace of the day. After 2 seasons as a coach, Loud moved on to the front office, where he was the director of player personnel for the Patriots from 1968 to 1971. And then he was a director of scouting from 71 to 73. In September of 71, there was a big back page story, and it was exclusive. And the headline was, black group petitioned NFL for franchise known as the Memphis Kings. Again, Mr. Lyle's vision was he was going to own an NFL team. It will be all black owned. It'll be located in Memphis, Tennessee, because that's where Dr. King was assassinated. And 3 years earlier, and the nickname would be the Kings after his last name. He had a lot of great investors at this time, Sammy Davis Jr., Sidney Poitier, Jim Brown, and they had partnered with other black celebrities for estimated $12 million to $14 million raised so they can get the expansion fee paid by the NFL. They also solicited the Martin Luther King Jr. Foundation and several prominent black-owned businesses, Ebony Magazine, Park Sausage, and Johnson Products. They even considered going to President Nixon, who was an avid football fan, and asking for help. Similar to how owners go to civic municipalities now, and, well, if you don't give me a new city, I'm going to move my team. They went big fish and tried to go to the president. Again, in this vision, it was going to be black owned from top to bottom. And all the top jobs will be filled by black NFL veterans. They were considering Jim Brown and Toddy and John Mackey as the who was the head of the Players Union. Of course, at this time, Jim Brown had retired and was making blaxploitation films, and they were both considered as being president of the Memphis Kings. They also had a list of potential coaches, and again, they were all black men. And the top two candidates were Eddie Robinson of Grambling and Emlyn Tunnell of the New York Giants. He was an assistant coach there. The Pittsburgh Courier talked about this. The famous Bill Nunn wrote, and what he said was how the whites will react to a black-owned team remains questionable, but this dream of black-owned franchise is no longer a fantasy. Again, excuse me. Mr. Loud had put the money together. He had the infrastructure. He had former NFL players, so they knew what was going on. He wanted to bring the top college coach, Eddie Robinson, at the time. So he really had a good vision. There was another sports writer who predicted that the black people across the country will become avid rooters and black players will want to be traded to the new club. So it's similar to if you look what's going on at Jackson State now, how the influx of talent they're getting due to Deion Sanders and the staff that he's assembled. Sports writers saying this was going to happen in the NFL and everybody wanted to play for the Memphis Kings. The day after the Record American report, of course, the NFL executive denied any knowledge of these efforts, even though you have to speak to them and get permission to, raise the money for the franchise fee to be considered. There's a lot of steps that go in this process. Think of it like you're trying to join a fraternity or sorority. You have to go through certain stages, and that's what he was going through. But again, the NFL denied any involvement. He said there was no interest in Memphis to launch a franchise. The Boston Patriots and the New York Jets had just played a preseason game there, and they said based off the fan support that the NFL had no current plans to expand. However, we found this to be untrue as a year later, in August of '72, the Tampa Tribune reported that Loud and Jim Brown had met with officials in Orlando, Florida, about moving the team instead of having it in Memphis, put a team in Orlando, which after a feasibility study, they said they could do. Loud again, went through the steps, and when he finally got to the end of his process, again, getting his franchise fee, he went public that winter and told the Boston Globe that he planned to meet with Rozelle for his final pitch for the Orlando team, or the Tampa Bay Orlando area. He stated, "I know some people will call me a nigger, but that won't bother me. I know what I am and I know what I can do." Loud said, "Blacks have broken all kinds of barriers in sport. We've proven we can do the job in almost every area. This is the last step." So he understood coming from Memphis to the Tampa Bay, Orlando area, the racial sentiment, but he still wanted to move forward. Again, Orlando officials were told that Brown has demanded and gotten such a promise for Pete Rozelle that it can be done. Again, this was denied. And the expansion franchise, after the owners met, Lau was passed over, and it was given to construction magnate Thomas McCloskey, who in 1973 founded the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So again, if you look at the revenue earned by the Buccaneers, who won last year's Super Bowl, a decision by 31 men could ultimately decide if you're to be a multi-billionaire. Because again, once you own the team, you own everything, the licensing, everything involved with the team, you get a piece of that, or you get it and then it's distributed. So again, this is another opportunity that was passed, and it was just sad. In 1974, Lau became the owner of the Florida Blazers of the World Football League. So he still was a trailblazer and became the first black top executive in major sports history. Now, the World Football League didn't last very long, as we know. And I'll detail you some of the issues he had with the Blazers. The Blazers, they failed, and one thing was due because of debt. They amassed more than $2 million in debt. Bounce checks happened, missed payroll, and they were sued by their business partners in the league. One investor even kicked the team out of the Holiday Inn offices. Lau was accused the city of overcharging for services and of racial discrimination. One reason he did this is because most sports teams, if you're in the smaller leagues, you're going to get your money at the end of the year or the back end off of merchandising revenues through the entire season. So since you're a sports entity or a larger organization, these organizations or these other businesses or vendors will let you keep a balance towards the end of the year, maybe even a couple years. And you just pay that balance off. As a black owner, he wasn't afforded that luxury. And if you get something, you need to pay it now. We're going to report you. So it was some unethical business practices going on due to his color. He stated, if I had been a white man, things here the past few years would have been somewhat different. And even stated with all the financial issues, they lost to the Birmingham Americans in the World Bowl 22-21. And those issues he were talking about, again, what I just detailed about owners acquiring debt and paying it after the season with revenues from television and apparel. He wasn't allowed that opportunity. Being said, he was ousted as a general managing partner 2 days before Christmas and arrested on charges of embezzling state taxes from Blazers ticket sales. So again, he's the owner, and he was embezzled from taking the money from ticket sales. And they said he didn't pay his taxes, but again, you pay taxes at a certain time in the year. So in March of 75, right before his trial began, the Sentinel Star splashed the headline that they put some dope charges on him as well. The paper described the cocaine smuggling and sales ring that operated in 3 states. He then was convicted of arranging the sale of 4 ounces of cocaine for $4,800 in Florida and smaller amounts in Boston. The funny thing about this, Lau wasn't present for none of the sales and never saw the money or the cocaine. So you'll find out there was an informant. Well, I'll just let you listen. They also put new charges on him, including tax embezzlement, which were dropped, and he was sentenced to 14 years. In 1977, the newspaper opened the case back up, and they found, oh man, when you talk about people being set up, what they found in this case was amazing. He was definitely framed by the local authorities. An investigator told him, we're going to get the black SOB one way or the other. There was some surveillance tape showing an agent who posed as a businessman, as an investor for the team. And since they were financially desperate and he couldn't get loans, he posed as a businessman and said he can invest up to $1 million in the team, and actually gave Lau some cocaine. Again, this is what sort of high society or business was doing at the time. And again, he was given that, not sold it. And again, this agent denied any improper investigation, but then he was fired from the sheriff's department in 78 because he was running amok in the community. He basically said that was their way of getting him out, and that's why he was framed. They didn't want a black man to head up an organization that'd be worth $25 million someday. So again, with all these charges, he only served 3 years of a 14-year sentence. He later began to work in community development, hosted a sports show for prison television, and was an associate minister upon his release at a church in Miami, where he died in 1998 at the ripe age of 64. Again, Mr. Lau was correct. Today, the average value of an NFL team is nearly $3 billion. Again, they didn't have the television and everything back when Mr. Lau was alive. So even though the 25 million he thought was used, 3 billion now, this is going to grow with the new television deal. But the league still hasn't been able to, as Pete Rozelle said in 73, pace the problems of minority ownership. The NFL has no African-American majority owners, let alone a black-owned team named for a civil rights icon. So thank you for listening about Mr. Lau. We're going to take a quick break, and we come back. We're going to highlight the African-American Sports Entertainment Group. Thank you for tuning in to Sports 101, and we'll be right back.
Autism is a spectrum disorder. This means it affects each and every person differently. People with autism explore the world in unique ways. It's time to start seeing autism from a new perspective. I'm Megan Sinisi, Miss Central Pennsylvania, asking you to pledge to be an acceptance ambassador today at FromANewPerspective.org. With your help, we can inspire a community of inclusion for the 3.5 million Americans living with autism.
Accept, respect, empower.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans, and soon they will be available to everyone.
This vaccine means hope. It will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
I want to go back to work, and I want to be able to move around.
To visit with Michelle's mom, to hug her and see her on her birthday.
You know what I'm really looking forward to is going to opening day in Texas Ranger Stadium with a full stadium.
We've lost enough people, and we've suffered enough damage.
In order to get rid of this pandemic, it's important for our fellow citizens to get vaccinated.
I'm getting vaccinated because we want this pandemic to end as soon as possible.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
So roll up your sleeve and do your part.
This is our shot.
Now it's up to you.
Compassion, noun. Sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of others. We're all born with it. It's in us. Don't believe me? When you hear a baby cry, something pulls at you. You want to ease that pain. You want to soothe that hurt. No one had to teach you that. It's called compassion, and it's in you. However, at some point you turned it off when it came to me.
Me.
The cries of my soul have gone unheard, but today, you will hear me.
My heart has wailed a melody loud enough to shatter your ears, and you ignored me. But this week, you will hear me.
This body has beat the drums of anguish, only to be silenced. But this month, you will hear me.
This year,
this decade,
this century,
I will be heard. And
you will be the one to hear me.
And when I am finally heard,
show compassion.
Show compassion.
Show compassion.
Remember, it's in you.
Welcome back. I'm Jamar Harp, and this is Sports 101, the show that discusses sport beyond the X's and O's. We talk about the game from a people, places, and cultural perspective, looking through the lens of history, past, present, and in the making. Again, make sure you get social with this show and SportsZone Chicago's litany of other shows by following us on social media. You can follow us on Twitter at SportsZoneCHI, Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, search SportsZone Chicago, but more importantly, download the SportsZone Chicago app. The SportsZone Chicago app can be found in the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. Now I'd like to talk about the African American Sports and Entertainment Group. Again, if you can look at this picture right here, this is from a virtual convention that they had, or a conversation, where they were introducing the local members of the group. They're trying to get people to voice their opinions and see the vision of the Alameda County complex. And again, that's what we'll kind of focus on. So last month, owners representing the 32 NFL teams had their owners meetings virtually to discuss the state of the league. That's what happens at the owners meetings. Any rules and regulations may pass, etc. Henceforth to 17 games now. And they want to just make sure the league appears to be in good hands. And this is happening on the heels of the recent signing of broadcast rights contracts of more than $110 billion. Again, these owners divide this lucrative pie. There's an African-American sports group located in Oakland, California, hoping to get their community a piece. That group, again, is the African-American Sports and Entertainment Group, also known as AASEG. They're hoping to ride the wave of social awakening that's been happening this last year, when during the pandemic, people begin to better understand the country's racial inequalities, in particular the sports inequalities. Part of the mission of the AESEG is to bring the professional football team back to Oakland, and they also want to make history and follow in the footsteps of Mr. Loud as being the first Black-owned NFL ownership group. They've been stated as they feel like this is a Jackie Robinson moment for them, and that's Raymond Ray Bobbitt, who is pictured right here. He's an avid Raiders fan and a local Oakland businessman. He created the AASEG, and he's a founder of an Oakland-based facility management and urban consulting company. One of the main people Bobbitt leans on for advice and guidance is Bill Duffy. Bill Duffy was a longtime sports agent and CEO of BDA Sports. For more than 3 decades, Mr. Duffy has represented some of the most talented basketball players in the world. Some people on his roster are Yao Ming, Steve Nash, Luka Doncic, and last year Duffy stepped out of his comfort zone. And again, you can't be an owner as well as an agent at the same time. So you retired from being an agent to join the AASEG ownership group. When they did their SWOT analysis and got their plan ready, they start to face some initial challenges. The first one was to acquire the city of Oakland's share of the Oakland Coliseum site, and that's the home of the Oakland Athletics. So you can see the site right here. To the left is where the Warriors used to play, and to the right is where the Raiders and A's play. And the problem is the Alameda County sold a share of the site last year to the Oakland A's. So there's 3 groups vying for this property. That'll be AASEG, the A's, and a group led by former A's pitcher Dave Stewart, trying to purchase the city's share of this site. Again, owning the city's share, would allow you to take control of the site and then ask for ownership or redevelop it or kind of do what you want to do. The city has received several letters of interest in the Coliseum complex from various interested parties, including AASEG. And this is from Karen Boyd, and she's the communications director for the city of Oakland. The city is looking forward to receiving a more detailed written proposal from AASEG and other interested parties to consider each bid and decide who they're going to go with. AASEG can clear the hurdle of buy-ins Oakland's, the city of Oakland's portion of the Coliseum location. Their plans are to build a new stadium with the hopes of securing the NFL team. Remember, NFL teams often say they put pressure or threaten the cities to build a modern stadium where they're going to leave. So they're just doing it backwards. They're coming in saying, we're going to build a brand new stadium complex. Come to us, NFL. The next obstacle they face in regards to ownership is that, remember, only individuals can own teams, with the controlling owner holding at least a 30% stake. Since they have an ownership group, technically, they're out of compliance with NFL rules and regulations. So under these rules, NFL owners, if they were to consider the AASEG plan that was first presented last year, they will have to make an exception. Now, again, exceptions can be made henceforth Green Bay, but it's up to the owners to decide who's going to make an exception. So if we look at the culture and the ethnicity of Green Bay, Wisconsin, and the people that own that town, obviously that would make sense for the owners to have a public town of Green Bay owning the team, and those citizens get rich versus, let's say, Chicago. Like if everybody on the South Side owned a piece of the White Sox. So just think how much money would be made. Due to the lack of equality economically, there's probably 2 or 3 African Americans who fit the NFL's criteria of only having a single owner. And again, that's something that the owners came up as a barrier of entry. We talk about voting, in particular what's going on in Georgia now. So these are some of the things the NFL are doing to restrict entry by people of color by saying you only can have one majority owner and you have to have 30%. We're looking for hopefully a more creative model where they can get a lot more flexibility. And currently that's what AASEG is working on in regards to get this ownership bid. In their ownership bid, AASEG is proposing along the lines of the Green Bay Packers, which is the only publicly owned team in the NFL. So what they're saying is, this is something you're already doing for Green Bay. Why can't you do it for us here in Oakland? What's the difference between Oakland and Green Bay? We have a lot more business in Oakland than Green Bay. So they're painting a picture of the economic impact that the NFL and all the owners can reap by putting a team in Oakland that has a lot more business and is more busier due to the amount of people, and letting them use the same policy that Green Bay uses, whereas group ownership. The group of the Packers, who were formed in 1919, again, are exempt from this current ownership rule, which was established in the 1980s by the owners at that time. The group has dialogue with the NFL last year after announcing its plans and hope to have further discussions with the league. Again, the main hiccup is this group ownership rule. Duffy, with his experience as a sports agent in the NBA, he serves as a chief strategist and lead spokesperson for AASEG. And he also has ushered in other big-time members. We have Robert C. Bobb. Now, Mr. Bobb, he served as a city manager in cities that included Santa Ana, California, Richmond, Virginia, Oakland, and Washington, D.C. Mr. Bobb was a deputy mayor in Washington when the Washington Nationals relocated from Montreal. So he spearheaded that economic boom for Washington, D.C. And what happened is there was an area in Southwest D.C. that was downtrodden. They ended up tearing it down, building National Stadium, where basically nothing was there. It's like right off the highway. And the impact has created a lot of revenue for the city. Now, there was citizens displaced that lived in that area, which is the only negative side effect I can see. But again, he was able to get a major league team quickly to Washington, D.C. Next, we have Jim Reynolds, who is the CEO of Loop Capital. Loop Capital is an African-American owned investment banking and management company. And again, he joined AASEG in the hopes of having a black-owned NFL team. Next, we have Alan Dones. Mr. Dones is the managing partner of SUDA, and that's a company specializing in large-scale public agency projects and mixed-use development. Next, we have the women, the last but not least, the only woman of the group, and this is Miss Shonda Scott. Miss Scott is the founder of 360 Total Concept, which is an Oakland-based management consulting firm. So again, most of these people are from the Oakland area and just want to revitalize their community. Miss Scott said when she heard about who was involved in this group, she was excited because these are people who are well respected in the business community in general, not black or white, just the business community in general. And she was approached by Mr. Bobbitt last year. Within the group, she stated it's a perfect opportunity that the NFL and this nation moving forward towards a new day of diversity and inclusion. And again, their main tenet that they're running on is the Green Bay Packers are allowed to operate in a group module with the whole town owning the team. So why can't they be afforded that luxury, being that you're asking for minority ownership? We have the money. If we get the stadium, we have the infrastructure. So we just need your support. In January, Washington Redskins vet Stump Mitchell and longtime NFL assistant coach. He also was the head coach of Southern University and the Southwestern Athletic Conference before Deion Sanders. So again, from previous episodes, we talked about former NFL players coaching historically black college, but are just not getting the publicity. Stump Mitchell was the head coach of Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He had never been a head coach, and he offered this suggestion to the Undefeated newspaper. And what Mr. Mitchell suggested is that the NFL expand the league by 2 teams. He wants the NFL to add 1 team in the AFC and 1 in the NFC, and allow those teams to have a minority owner or a black owner, a black coach, and a black general manager. He wants the NFL to give the teams 5 years to make it work. And if it doesn't work after that time, you have the right to hire whoever you want at those 2 teams. So basically what Mr. Mitchell was saying is he wants the black individuals who oftentimes get a quick hook in regards to hiring and only are one and done in the coaching circuit, and particularly head coaches. He wants to give them a 5-year window where they can get acclimated, build a team that they want. And what he's betting on is just like people said what Mr. Loud is. If I have an African-American GM, an African-American head coach, an African-American owner, then why wouldn't the players want to come play for that team if the league is 80% African-American? So again, this may be one of the barriers of entry that is stopping this group from owning the team, because a lot of people know that it'll be like the NBA where there's super teams being built. You might see an NFL super team. The idea of a team consisting of all black head coaches, management, and ownership is very appealing to AASEG, and they want to run with that. Now, again, their main goal is to return football to Oakland. Their secondary goal is to create a Black Wall Street 2, or the second Black Wall Street. And they want this to be similar to the vibrant district that was known as Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, before it was bombed by the government in the early 1900s. The proposed district is similar to what, if you ever been to Pittsburgh, down by the river, they have a lot of things being built there. They have a casino, science center, football, baseball parks. They built some condos, some luxury condos, Allegheny Avenue area, things like that. They want to do the same thing here, but they want it to be similar to the LA Live complex in Los Angeles that surrounds the Staples Center. So when you look at the Staples Center, you can go to the Staples Center and go to a basketball game, an outdoor concert. You can go shopping, you can go to restaurants, and they want to include that in Oakland. But they also want to add a convention center, academic facilities, housing, and the Oakland Sports and Entertainment Hall of Fame. Why do they want to do this? Because they say it's a travesty that Bill Russell doesn't have a statue in Oakland, and they want to honor. They want a Hall of Fame to honor everybody that's from Oakland, that came from any field or any court said Bobbitt. One reason he wants to do this because a lot of people, if you remember, MC Hammer used to be a bat boy for the Oakland A's. There's a lot of city pride in Oakland, even to E40 and his music exploits and making our own language and having this dictionary. People take being from Oakland to heart, and they just want to do this for their community and improve the African American citizens in there who oftentimes are victims of regentrification. Mr. Bobbitt, who used to sell water and umbrellas at the sporting events as a Coliseum as a kid, fell in love with sports at that time. So again, they want this Hall of Fame to put everybody from Oakland in there. So that's from Marshawn Lynch to Bill Russell to any Oakland great that if you were a high school great, they want an Oakland Sports Hall of Fame to dedicate it to the people of Oakland. Again, what they hope to accomplish is not only revitalize the site, but to revitalize their entire community and to do it without gentrification and displacement being a vehicle like it's happened throughout Oakland and other parts of the United States. So again, wrapping up with my final thoughts of this episode, I'd like to bring you a few questions and statements. So basically what this group is hoping to accomplish has been done by countless other cultures and races. When we look at, for example, we talked about early NFL ownership, how the Rooneys bought a team for under $100 because of the color of their skin, and now it's worth billions. Other races have done this among themselves, and the African American Sports and Entertainment Group wants to do the same thing for their people. Economic empowerment has always been secondary in the African community to religion and voting, and that's been a major problem in the community. While in our community, you see a lot of churches on every block, and during election time, there's always someone coming to ask you to vote, but there's no sense of community economics to buy the politicians, as Dr. Claude Anderson states in his book Powernomics, that you have to have economic solidarity as a race and culture first to buy politicians to get what you want. If you don't do that, then voting is futile in most areas because the politicians acquiesce to who? The people that pay them. The Black Wall Street Initiative around the area differs from gentrification in most areas where development occurs. Again, this is highly unique. Most people, they come into an area and they build it up, and the current residents have to leave. What they're doing around the Oakland Coliseum is, no, we want you to stay and take a part of this, and we're going to build some academic centers for you to make it community-based. So that's very revolutionary thinking. It is my hope that this group prevails and is a model for other sports and entertainment professionals who want to support financially. So if the AASEG can do this, then why can't a group of NBA players or MLB players, 10 MLB players get together and buy something? The possibilities are endless. What if players start adopting historically Black colleges and universities, and 3 players would adopt each school and with the playing field level? These are things that we have to consider in this social movement that's taking place. How do we firmly capitalize and take advantage of it? With this wave of commitment to historically Black colleges and universities by major athletes and celebrities, it's akin to the 1960s and 70s. And again, this should be the catalyst to regain prominence that these schools once had. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Sports 101. I'm your host, Jamar Harp. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Coach_Harp412 and Facebook under Jamar Harp. Please get social with Sports 101 and the litany of SportsZone Chicago's other shows by following us on social media. On Twitter, you can find us at SportsZone CHI, Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, search SportsZone Chicago, but most importantly, please download the SportsZone Chicago app. SportsZone Chicago is the only Black-owned sports podcast network in the United States, and we want this to grow similar to the African American Sports and Entertainment Group. You can find the SportsZone Chicago app on the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon store. Again, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Sports 101. We'll see you next Wednesday at our normal time of 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. I'm your host, Jamar Harp. My producer, Maya Kai. We will bid you farewell.
I just arrived to get my COVID shot, and this is one shot I won't block.
Gratitude to a great ball club for a courageous effort.
No Celtics were harmed during my shot. Let's do this together. To learn more about vaccines, visit cdc.gov.